Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magic and Media, the podcast brought to you by the Vibe Collective and me, Carly D, a reader and manager here at the Vibe Collective. This podcast blends magic with the current pop culture news and moments to show you that magic is all around us every day. We just have to look around and find it. So we find the metaphysical and the magic in the world all around us and share it with you. So welcome to this week's mini Magic and Media. This is our first mini episode because, as you can tell by my voice, I am sick. So I am not honestly even feeling like I have the vocal bandwidth to do a full episode. So we are going to do a mini episode this week about Mercury Retrograde, how we are already seeing it show up in our own lives as well as in the media, of course. And if you are someone who typically watches, you will also see that this is an audio only podcast episode today. Being sick, I just really did not feel like being on camera, which honestly is very Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde affects technology, and while my technology is all good, I don't want to be on camera. But again, I just like to remind people in Mercury retrograde, one of my biggest messages is it's okay to slow down. It is okay to rest. It is okay to revisit. It is okay to rewind, refocus. I always tell people to think of the prefix re during a retrograde. So returning to something, redoing something. There's a strong connection with revisiting and being reminded of things when we are in a retrograde as well. So let me just remind you that if you are feeling sick, tired, depressed, like Heidi even talked about in some of our videos this week, it's important to find the difference between just being tired, being depressed, and now let's also throw in, is it Mercury retrograde and it just seems like everything is working against you, when really it's happening for us, not to us. So that being said, let's get into our first mini episode of Magic and Media. Let's talk about Mercury retrograde. We're going to keep it short and sweet this week, but have a good amount of information and definitely give you some stuff to think about as we continue into this Mercury retrograde. So this Mercury retrograde actually started yesterday, February 25th, and it will last until March 20th. So like I was saying at the start of this podcast, I do emphasize the prefix re when it comes to retrogrades, to really slow down and refocus our energy. But I also remind people that it's okay to go back to certain projects and revisit certain projects or maybe businesses, ideas, books that we've put aside. So if you have some creative endeavors that are calling to you, our Mercury retrograde is a good time to slow down and revisit them. Mercury also rules travel, communication, and technology. So around all of those topics, I encourage you to have patience. Patience will come up a lot in this week's mini episode because it is one of the best tools to use as we move through Mercury retrograde. And today's episode is really fun because part of why I wanted to do this podcast was to kind of just talk to the Vibe Collective crowd out there, the way I talk to my friends about astrology, how we see it affecting us, how we actually see it showing up in life instead of just kind of the ethereal idea of astrology or Mercury retrograde. So I want to make it very real for you and show you how these things show up in our life. So these are let's start with my tips for Mercury retrograde, what to pay attention to and focus on. Number one, think before you speak. Communication. If you have something very touchy to say, or maybe not nice or not so tasteful on the tip of your tongue, I encourage you to not say it during a Mercury retrograde. Communication can be very misunderstood, very misconstrued. You can see arguments and just a lot of miscommunications, again, show up during a Mercury retrograde. So if you are like, maybe should I or should I not say that? I recommend not saying it. It's honestly even kind of funny to think about communication wise, even my voice giving out like the week of the Mercury retrograde. Like there's just like even certain little things like that we can notice or pay attention to. But yes, think before you speak. Communication, miscommunication is huge during Mercury retrograde. So over explain if you need to, and that includes written communication, so emails and texts. Don't assume that people know what you are saying. Be very clear about what you are saying. So this is a time to clear things up if you feel like you did say something that was maybe misunderstood or misconstrued. Take that time to revisit it and clear things up. But in general, again, think before you speak. Really don't just be saying anything or saying wild stuff. I would even say when it comes to like gossip or spilling tea, this is a time to, again, be mindful of how we're communicating and what we're saying. Another tip I have is to pack your patience and backup plans, even if you don't need them. And this has a lot to do with, I would say, travel or even just plans in general. When it comes to Mercury retrograde, be ready for maybe needing to use that plan B, C, or D, but have the plans in place. Trust me, it's like when you pack an umbrella and it doesn't rain. You need to have these plans in place when you go into a Mercury retrograde. Like I said, even if you don't need to use them. But this is not a time to kind of like hope that things work out or to leave 10 minutes late and think you're going to like make it up in traffic. Mercury retrogrades are a time to be patient, be very smart about travel, and if anything, have backup plans, maybe be ready for construction or certain roads to be shut down. Give yourself extra time. Retrograde is often like unexpected little hiccups in these things like travel, communication, and technology. Again, another tip I have is to be patient just because some things will take longer. There may be certain things you think you will finish while we're in this retrograde. So don't be surprised if things need to be double checked, redone, put through a filter one more time. Have patience for things to take a little longer, for things to move a little slower. I always compare Mercury retrograde to walking through mud. It takes longer and it's harder, but you will get there in the end. So double check everything, double check your documents, spell check, grammar check, and take your time. Do not rush during a Mercury retrograde. Let things take their time. It is all worth it in the end. If anything, I feel it's kind of just to protect us from things not working out later. So patience, patience, patience. I cannot stress that enough with Mercury retrograde. That will help you as you move through it. So when you feel a little stressed, just remember patience and how important that is during a Mercury retrograde. And my last tip for you today is to travel with care. So don't leave late. Don't bank on things working out. Like we said, don't think that, I can make up this time later. Be prepared. And then when you think you're prepared, prepare some more. If you are traveling, have those backup plans, leave early, have extra stuff packed for you, have extra outfits packed for you. Prepare, prepare, prepare. Those are my two mantras for this retrograde: patience and prepare. Make sure that you are doing yourself favors and setting yourself up for success when we have these already kind of astrological roadblocks with Mercury retrograde. Now, the one magic in media that I'm going to tap on with this Mercury retrograde that I thought was interesting, this is in a lot of pop culture news, but the very popular podcast Call Her Daddy. If you don't know its lore or the history of Call Her Daddy, which is now hosted by Alex Cooper, you'd have to look up more of the lore, but the interest of this story, I will tell you, she initially started the podcast with a co-host. Her name was Sofia Franklyn, and there was a big fallout between the two hosts around 2020 when Call Her Daddy was leaving Barstool? Yeah. Call Her Daddy was leaving Barstool in 2020. There was a fallout between the two hosts, Alex Cooper and Sofia Franklyn of Call Her Daddy. Now, we know that Alex Cooper did end up taking Call Her Daddy. She has made it into her own business, podcast, production company, everything on her own. But this story of Sofia Franklyn is going to be coming out in her memoir, which is what she announced yesterday. So yesterday, Sofia Franklyn announced that she will be writing a memoir called Daddy Issues, based around her life as well as the big fallout of Call Her Daddy with Alex in 2020. So if you are someone who listens to this podcast, Call Her Daddy, or you're familiar with it, you kind of know the backstory, but it is kind of a crazy story. I have definitely listened to some podcasts about it, and it does seem like the way it went down was maybe not so fair to Sofia. She was a part of like making the initial podcast. So there's definitely drama around all of this in 2020. Now we're in 2026. Obviously, Call Her Daddy has become what it is. I know that Sofia Franklyn has her own podcast, but it is obviously not as popular as Call Her Daddy. But I think that this is very interesting that she's announcing this at the start of a Mercury retrograde for a few reasons. I would say that something to be very mindful about with writing this memoir is what she is saying, especially when it comes to like spilling tea or talking about gossip or drama. Retrogrades are a good time to revisit things. So that is a lot of what writing a memoir is. So I do think that that is good for her as far as the retrograde, to revisit something and write a memoir that is very retrograde coded, especially with her announcing the whole writing of the book on the first day of a Mercury retrograde. But what's interesting is that communication thing, right? Being smart about what we are saying, even if it's in the written form, like a memoir, as we talked about. So this is still her communicating her story, telling her story. And while she is revisiting it with, 6 years has passed, a lot has transpired, it can be very interesting to see what comes up. So I would recommend, just like I did for us, that she doubles and triple checks her work, everything that she is saying, so that they cannot come for her, the other parties involved, legally in any way once her book is out. So that is just in general kind of seen this news coming out of like a very salacious, gossipy book as a Mercury retrograde is starting. That just like clicked for me of like, we should be revisiting and revising and checking this a lot so no one can come for her legally once the book is out. So that is my advice, my astrological advice to Sofia Franklyn with writing this. But yeah, prediction wise, just pay attention to that. I would definitely recommend that she checks with her lawyers that everything is all good when it comes to what she is sharing with the other parties involved in her story, so they can't come back and try to take any legal action against her or the book, the project in general. So again, prediction wise, pay attention to that. I wouldn't be surprised if she doesn't do all her double checking if there is a little bit of a pushback on this. But again, something very interesting to pay attention to and kind of see how it all plays out. But I always think it's really interesting when big news like this is released on astrological days, especially as Mercury retrogrades are ending or beginning. I try to kind of track like what news is being spread by celebrities or certain artists. And it always makes me wonder, like, are they paying attention to this astrologically? There are a few celebrities I've definitely noticed who I think are paying attention to things astrologically. They announce things, when retrogrades end or in very like auspicious astrological times for new projects. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that on the podcast. Of just paying attention to when news is put out and how astrology affects that. But I do think she just needs to be very smart about how she approaches this book so she can avoid any blocks or delays in the book as she moves forward. So whenever we start a project during a Mercury retrograde, we usually have to revise it, revisit it, kind of go back and look at things. And I do think she will have to do that over the book process. We may not hear about it. It'll probably be done more in revisions. But yeah, my advice is to be very mindful of what you are saying. There's the famous Dorinda Medley quote of say it, forget it, write it, regret it. So take that with you into the Mercury retrograde as well. Be very mindful of all communication that you are putting out, whether it's emails, texts, phone calls. Just make sure we're being really smart about what we are saying. So that is our mini Magic in Media episode this week. I will be back next week. Hopefully my voice will be back too, because that will make for a much better episode. But stay safe in this Mercury retrograde, friends. And as always, find the magic in your own life.